Hello, everyone, and welcome to Alex Solutions and First CDO Partners joint webinar on how to elevate your AI projects with metadata management. Our mission is to help our audience walk away with the knowledge to effectively leverage metadata for the use of Gen AI to drive business growth. My name is York, and I am from the marketing team at Alex Solutions. I am absolutely honored to be introducing First CDO Partners to share more about who they are and their mission.
Hi, I'm Morgan Templer. I'm the CEO of First CDO Partners. Our mission is to create a better world through better information. And we do that by helping organizations find gaps in their capabilities with data, help them understand how to establish data governance and better data management practices, and assist them in closing any of their capability gaps so that they can utilize information and data to the maximum level possible, and find a way to make the world a better place.
First, thanks for inviting us to this webinar. I think metadata is a topic that is not discussed enough. I'm Robert Sidek, and I'm currently COO of First CDO Partners. As you mentioned, we're a data governance and data management consulting company. I have 20 years experience in technology, data, and strategy, bouncing between industry and consulting, several industries, healthcare, pharma, consumer health, big conglomerates, and fairly recently I was on a large government giga project. But now I'm excited to help companies get their data in order and set up governance to keep it in order so they can extract value from it and make data their superpower.
Yeah, I'm Rainer. I'm the field CTO at Alex Solutions. We specialize in helping our customers find, understand, and use their data to generate business value in an ethical way. What makes Alex stand out is, firstly, automation. We focused very hard on automation, right from the development of our own harvesting engine for harvesting metadata, automating the curation and integration of that metadata into our platform. We use our harvesting engine to create all of our connectors in a consistent, scalable, and seamless way. We have a unified data platform powered by our knowledge graph, and that is a platform for generating actionable insights. It connects both technical and semantic information to provide a fully described data landscape. And then there's our lineage. Our lineage visualization and analysis provides easy to understand data flows and brings context to those data flows, like data quality, compliance, data protection. And it does this across platforms and technologies and applications to provide a consistent, seamless view across all of that. So I'd encourage our listeners to get in touch for a personalized demo and see how we can, help to deliver your unique business challenges.
Metadata is something we hear a lot these days. Can you explain to the audience what it is in simple terms?
Right. So think about metadata like a label that you would find on food at the grocery store. It's a set of information that provides that information about the thing that you're holding. And in this case, it's about the data that you're holding. It helps you understand kind of what it's about, making it easier to find, use, and manage. But when you think about what's on a food label, it's got all sorts of things that 100 years ago would have completely blown people's minds. They would never have understood, why are you telling me it's got 9 grams of fat and then it's got 30 carbohydrates, and what is that anyway? Today, we're very familiar with that terminology and how we read those labels and what they mean for us individually. And metadata is very much like that. It hasn't had its day in the sun. People haven't really learned how to understand what metadata is or why it's valuable, but it is really the hidden gem in being able to utilize data in a way that's very efficient and gives us the maximum value.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of aspects to metadata, aren't there? I mean, we talk about describing the metadata, descriptive metadata, like what kind of format is it and what's its name, what's its meaning. But there's a lot of contextual kind of metadata as well, like which application system did it come from and what's the role of that application system? Or what policies apply to this data, or what kind of controls and rules should be applied to this data to understand, your obligations related to using that data.
Playing off what you said, Rainer, I think it's right. Like metadata, when I think of it, I think of context. So if it's a data record of a patient, then it's where the patient lives, socioeconomic factors, their birthday, allergies, who last updated the record, etc. If it's a movie, director, genre, when it was released, who's watched it, critical ratings. So this context that the metadata provides is important because it can help you find the data, it can find related data, show relationships between data, or like you were saying, just understand how to use the data. So is this piece of data PII or PHI? Does it have to conform to certain rules? Like there's no numeric characters on this data. So in general, metadata adds a lot of value to data by providing this context.
I reckon that's a great example, the movie that you just gave, because there's some information there about that movie, like who produced it. That's a fact about the movie that would help you to understand something. But it's, Rotten Tomatoes rating. That's a sentiment, right? That's coming from other sources. And it's the same with data. Some of that data is just cataloging that data, which system, which platform, which schema, those sorts of things. Other information is like profiling data, like what's its quality, what's its, statistical skew and normal curves and things like that. And then there's collaboration, like what do I use this data for? Where have I found this data useful and things like that. So we've got different sources of this kind of metadata as well.
I think one thing that confuses people about metadata is it's sometimes the way you look at it. So if I'm looking at patients, a lab result will be a piece of metadata for that patient. But if I'm looking at lab results, they end up with their own metadata, like, what kind of image is it? When was it created? What was it for? What were the results? And so it does get confusing because, one object's metadata, could be just data in its own right, depending on how you're looking at it.
Can we talk about how metadata influences AI model training and what role does it play today?
That's a really big question with a lot of really big answers. I think the primary, if you break it down to its main core and what it really does do, it really makes sure that the information that we have is the right information. You can identify and filter based off of your metadata. You can make sure that you have the right accuracy and consistency. So that data quality and relevance for when you're pulling data is really important. Once you have that data, being able to organize and manage it and put it into categories and really think about like version control and keeping track of the data you do have. The training efficiencies are another important part of that. Metadata enables efficient indexing and the proper retrieval of data, which makes it a lot faster to pull it out when you're utilizing the model. But there are just so many more things that you could really talk about with what it really does. But the one that I'm going to jump to, because I think is so important, is ethics and compliance. When we work with certain kinds of data, they are restricted. So they have some type of security restriction or privacy or ethical restriction. We don't talk about socioeconomic factors. Sometimes the name needs to be removed. Sometimes you can't use zip code because it's a stand-in for race or for socioeconomic status. And so when you think about the things that are in metadata, data provenance, you can do bias detection. It really helps us with being compliant with our ethics and our privacy regulations. And so ultimately, I see metadata as kind of that deck of cards that says, this is what you can and cannot do with this information. And so it's actually really important when you're trying to put together a model.
Yeah, I think that's certainly important, and the metadata does give you those kinds of classifications and obligations and those sorts of things. I think one of the other areas you touched on was indexing the data or finding that data. And we're seeing much more now, the definition of data sets and data products. So this helps to mature the library of data that's available for use in those models, right? It's a bit like a candy shop of data, and these are curated and placed on the shelf, and we can go in and select the exact data that might be suitable for our model.
When I think of, how to use metadata in these AI model trainings, um, I, ex I expect, like a chat GPT heavily uses the metadata about what these things are. These are text documents. What's the language? What's the topic? When was this published? Did this come from a book, an article, or a Reddit thread, which can get them in trouble, as we've seen. But hopefully they also use metadata to detect bias in their training models, sort of goes to the ethics that Morgan was mentioning, and determine the trustworthiness of a document. Also, if you think about the various tasks all these GPTs can do, so you have one to do text generation, data analysis, image generation, programming code or debugging code. It's a lot of metadata driving these capabilities. So the data and metadata have to be organized for the context in which the tool is going to be used, because there's no one size fits all solution. I feel like these AI tools are employees with different skill sets because they've been trained differently with different metadata. And so when I have one certain task, I'll go to one GPT. If I have a different task, I have to open up another one. So it's kind of interesting where the state of the industry is, because there's no one place to go yet.
Mm-hmm. From your experience, what are some of the best practices out there when it comes to metadata management?
So a big part of metadata best practice is obviously documenting your data. And as I mentioned before, doing that as much in an automated way as possible. But really what I want to focus on is there's descriptive metadata, there's technical metadata, there's curated metadata, like do I trust this? Or what's its business classification? And then there's governance metadata, like sensitivity classifications or relationships to critical data elements and business criticality. So all of these different views or aspects of metadata that need to be captured. And a knowledge graph that I was talking about right in my introduction is a critical component for linking all these different aspects of the metadata and just fully describing those data assets. And that makes that data ready to be ingested for an AI as well.
I love that you talk about having metadata essentially being a knowledge graph, and you build these models on those ontologies. I think that's a really critical component of where we're going. I think that it's, the knowledge graphs are brand new, but the idea of the large language model and how it works versus when it sits on a semantic model from your ontology and your knowledge graph it's very exciting to see where we're going to go with that. And I feel like it's more about you actually have the answers there versus you've just got a probabilistic answer. So it's a really good feature and one that I highly appreciate.
I'll add, so, when you talk about all that documenting, I'd say one best practice is to align to a relevant standard for you or your industry, because then the documentation is kind of there for you and just aligning. In healthcare, for example, we have HL7. And for those that are unfamiliar with that, it essentially defines data and metadata for clinical and administrative information. So think of data being transferred between providers, between your doctors, hospital systems, or data transfer between those providers and your insurance company. So adopting an industry standard makes it easier to interact with vendors and their tools, with regulators, if you're in a regulated industry like healthcare, even internally between departments or kind of business silos, because if each silo is adopting the same standard, now it's much easier to integrate their data. So just making sure everyone's using the same definitions of the elements is quite a big shortcut if your industry has some kind of standard.
Let's get practical for a moment. How do you see metadata being used in real-world AI applications?
Add a little twist, because just yesterday I read about AI being used to create a magnet that doesn't use rare earth metals. So it was able to solve this problem in 3 months, which they claimed was 200 times faster than normal. Apparently, normal in this scenario is measured in decades. So this is an example of AI being used to solve a fairly specific problem. And in this case, it's making something without these rare earth metals. I'd expect this type of thinking and using AI to be applied to other products with similar metal problems, for example, like batteries. The battery technologies are really holding us back, I think, in the electrification of our world. Now, it does take knowledgeable people to set these up, but the trial and error, as we saw, can be done by AI at great scale.
I think about like the retail and e-commerce uses of metadata, product recommendations. You just can't, I don't think we could even have imagined 10 years ago that when I search for something to purchase on a certain commerce site, that not only does it give me alternatives of people like you also bought, or people who purchased this may also like this additional item, that level of sophistication, that level of knowing who I am, and can even tell the difference between me or my husband or one of my kids, and it recommends things that are appropriate based off of my past buying history and my past searches. And I'm sure that on the back end that helps with inventory management, and they've got some stuff building up, so they might want to recommend that to people. So it's kind of a win-win on both sides. It makes it more convenient for me, but it also gives the retailer the opportunity to maybe put forward other items that might have been a different idea. So that's just one example. There are many others, but I think you just think about how that it applies across the board. It's really helpful in healthcare. And I've been watching this for, I don't know, the last 15 years or so, when a doctor sitting next to me at some meeting gets a text message that the image that was just finished for his patient is done, and he'll pull up on his phone the MRI scans, and he knows which patient it is, and he knows what diagnostic notes he's put in there. It's all right there in that system for him. He can immediately say, this looks good, or, I think we need to look at this in greater detail before the patient leaves. Please do these blood tests. And I've literally seen doctors do that. And that's all because of the metadata that comes along with the image from the patient in real time.
A couple of real world examples I can talk about as well are, one is around data protection, right? Where we're using the Gen AI to classify data assets, meaning columns and fields, and that could be millions of them. And, in this particular situation, the customer was classifying applications as to whether they contained financial information or sensitive information and things like that. And the system classified one of the systems and said, the Gen AI classified one of the systems and said it contains health information. And this was disputed. And then on investigation, there was a kind of a timesheet capturing system that was one of its components. And sure enough, it was capturing sickness health certificates from the doctor, which was medical information. And so this is something, as a human, was missed, but the system picked it up. So it was a lovely use case. And another one is a compliance use case where financial organizations need to attest to lineage, and they need to attest that they understand the data transformations and that those transformations adhere to the business rules that they expect. And so in this case, the person doing the attestation is not a technical person. And so they look at this code and they say, I've got no idea whether this is actually implementing that business rule. And the LLM is going in and explaining the rule, stating what it's doing in human understandable, business understandable terms, including the objectives and the data used in the outputs. And that then helps to have that person attest to that lineage. So they're just some really important and great use cases of using AI.
So how can Alex enable enterprises to elevate their AI projects?
There's a couple of different ways that I can think of. Firstly, Alex is a hub for AI-ready metadata. So Alex can provide that metadata for use in the LLM or AI directly. So this includes business metadata. Alex provides crucial business context to the Gen AI application, information that can be leveraged to gain a deeper understanding of the data and produce more accurate and more relevant outputs. And this is data like data sensitivity classification. Is it restricted or confidential? Is business domain information, like is it part of North America, Europe, Asia Pac, or whatever the business domains represent? Does it belong to a subject area, like employee, sales, finance, and so on? Or business function? Is it part of procure to pay, incident to resolution, or request to service, those kinds of processes? Or is it a critical data element and used for critical business decisions or supporting critical business processes? So all of that helps that when it's ingested into the prompt or into the RAG by the LLM. And then there's sort of data understanding, providing the LLM with things like the program logic or SQL statements so that it gains a deeper understanding of what's been done to the data and to understand how relevant it is for the use case. That's one. Next is capturing Gen AI outputs directly, right? So Alex acts as a central repository for capturing and sharing outputs from those Gen AI models. And I gave some examples earlier, right? So those outputs can be captured and be shared with catalog users and for other automation use cases, including LLM and AI itself, right? So data protection. So in that data protection use case that I explained, the definition of the data, the classification scheme itself goes into Alex, into its business glossary, and that's used to configure the Gen AI prompt automatically. So there's no need to do manual configuration beyond that. And then the Gen AI uses that to classify all the assets, meaning the columns and fields. And then Alex captures the results of that. There's also, of course, all those other business classifications I spoke about, like domains and subject areas and functions. And then there's capturing business explanations directly into Alex as well, which was the other use case I mentioned. And then finally, Alex as a reference for AI projects. So capturing all this information, it can be used by the AI teams to then determine what data is fit for purpose for use in the AI use cases. So that's technical metadata, like which platform, which technology, schemas, and format is it in, so I know how accessible that data is and useful it is for the AI use case. And is it appropriate to be used for the AI use case? And appropriateness also comes down to data quality, right? So Alex integrates results from data quality profilers, where it assesses whether the data adheres to data quality rules and data quality dimensions. And this can be used to determine whether that data is fit for purpose for the AI use case. I've spent a bit of time talking about lineage as well. So understanding the data source and the transformations that are applied can help to understand whether that data is fit for purpose or is the right data to be used. And finally, are you complying with the regulations? And that's been an important point Morgan really emphasized is, am I allowed to use this data for the AI use case that I'm intending it to use for? Is it able to be used for marketing, or is it able to be shared with a cloud-hosted LLM? So in summary, Alex helps you with AI in terms of, one, providing the critical metadata to power the Gen AI model directly. Second, capturing and sharing outputs from AI models. And finally, being a reference for planning your AI project.
Amazing. Thanks, Raina. And lastly, how does investing in metadata translate to a return on investment in AI projects?
So when we're talking about investing in metadata and really the ROI that you get from that, improving data quality and accuracy is really your very first component that you get. Metadata helps us understand what information you're pulling and what it should look like. And if it pulls in and it's not the right data and it's not relevant, it's pretty easy to see that you've got misinformation. But also, I've never met a data scientist yet who doesn't complain about having to wrangle the data and clean it themselves every time they want to build a model. If we have our metadata in place, it's a lot easier for us to actually complete data quality projects in advance so that our data is sitting there clean and ready to use. And that it leads to operational efficiency so that you have much better streamlined data management practices, reducing the time and effort needed to get the right, consistent, relevant data so that you can utilize that in your model. There are a lot of other ways that it's used, but I think better decision making, understanding what information that you have helps you understand what were the results of your model and were they correct and accurate. And then, of course, a subcategory of that may be informed feature engineering. So when you're identifying the relevant features that you need for model training, the metadata helps you identify those, and that improves your model accuracy. So just a few of the many ways that it helps, but it's a pretty important component.
When I think of investing in quality metadata, I liken it to investing in quality food myself. So if I eat junk, I'll probably save money and it's easy to do, but I feel sluggish, my health markers deteriorate, and I'm not going to look healthy. But if you eat quality foods, the opposite happens. So similarly, AI is built on data and metadata. So if you feed it junky data, you're going to get junky results. I think the biggest change of thinking in the last few years was that originally there was this idea with big data that with enough big data, you can overcome low data quality, but that was not playing out in practice. So as a result, we're seeing a renewed interest in data governance and the improved data quality it creates. I also think of investing in metadata and metadata quality as a tide that lifts all boats. It'll help your AI projects for sure, but it also helps your data scientists do analysis, like Morgan said. It'll probably reduce data-oriented system errors. It'll improve customer experience, likely because you have better personalization, allows you create better data products, and really just help almost every IT project a little smoother, because I think a lot of IT projects get hung up in the details and the trouble that the data normally brings. So removing that friction will really help a lot of things move smoother.
Yep. And one thing I would probably add to that is with AI projects, there's a trend towards agents, AI agents, and these agents are given an assignment or an objective rather than asked a question to respond to. So metadata becomes a core component to driving that kind of use case. There's a dependency on the context, understanding where the data came from, what it means, and so on. There's dependence on corporate memory, which is it comes from collaboration of classifications and discussion threads and so on. And then there's decisions about the next best action that the AI agent needs to do. And that's dependent on things like data quality and criticality of the data and so on. So metadata becomes a foundation building block in those kinds of use cases.
Great. Now, before we come to a close, here's a quick summary of what Morgan, Robert, and Rainer have highlighted regarding the importance of metadata management in AI projects. We've dived deep with great use cases from healthcare, finance, and retail, just to name a few. And from here, we're able to really understand the business value that can be harnessed by implementing the best practices for metadata management highlighted in this session. Enterprises stand to enhance AI usability and efficiency, improve data quality and reduce bias, support AI training and trusted decision making, and last but not least, boost strategic and financial return on investment just from investing in metadata management. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you found this webinar insightful. And if you have any questions on how to better equip your organization to elevate AI initiatives with effective metadata management, please feel free to contact First CDO via LinkedIn or Alex Solutions. We look forward to continuing this journey with you, and have a great day. All right, that's a wrap.
Fantastic. Do we have to record
Good.
bloopers now?
No, I've got plenty of those.
Plenty of bloopers.